Assalamu alaikum. A good day to everyone. The topic which is going to be presented is Indirect Notion, Study of Advertisers' Approach and Consumer Behavior. The researcher is Madiha Maqsood, who is an MPhil scholar at Institute of Communication Studies, University of the Punjab, Lahore, Pakistan. Opening the discussion with the abstract, the study explored the role of advertisers, which seems to be inclined more towards indirect approaches as a mean of communication in Pakistan. It was further aimed to know the perceptions of the advertisers while creating advertisements by using attractive modes which are sometimes not directly related to the product. This triangulation study not only focused upon the advertiser's intention using indirect notion, but also dealt with the vision of the consumers and their priority patterns regarding buying behavior. The study is done with the help of two research methods, in-depth interview and survey. The researcher analyzed the data under the umbrella of Elaboration likelihood model. The study concludes that creatively advertised brands play an important role in order to get registered in the minds of people. The advertisements use mostly humor and emotional appeals to capture the audience mindset. Catchy advertisements result in the reduction of dissonance in the post-purchase behavior, which makes the consumer more confident in their buying decisions. The consumer loyalty with the product also hinders the way of new product in the market. Pakistani advertising agency is now moving towards the use of indirect notions, and it's not a much likely idea in the past. But now, the audiences are well sensitized so as the advertising notions. The keywords of the study includes indirect notions, advertising appeals, consumer behavior, audience attitude, mean of communication. According to Bernice Pitts, a good ad should be like a good sermon. It must not only comfort the afflicted, it also must afflict the comfortable. This research study aims to explore the recent advertising tactics in the way of relating indirect notions by applying various advertising approaches. The emphasis of the study is meant to establish the fact that the idea of using such discretion is leading towards a change of consumer behavior. The research intends to identify that advertisers are trying to use more indirect notions to attract the consumers, as the human nature has an inherent ability of attraction towards the unusual things. So, it is an appropriate insurance towards acquiring the large target audience and market capital. Usage of indirect notions is not a new practice, but it is being used in the recent times. The approach triggers intellectual, emotional, and psychological senses. This consumer attitude is letting advertisers introduce new and captivating appeals. The objectives of the research include: the research aims to find out the impact of using indirect notions in the advertising. The study wants to explore the audience preference patterns formed by the exposure of advertisements. The study looks into the advertiser's approach to position a product in a unique way. There are two hypotheses of the study. The first hypothesis is the use of indirect notions increases the consumption of the product by enhancing the urge to buy a product, following a null hypothesis. And the second hypothesis is the audience preference patterns formed by the exposure of advertisements increase their sensitization towards the indirect notion, which also follows a null hypothesis. Significance of the study. The study will help the advertising industry to analyze the effectiveness of using indirect notions in the advertisements and will be able to evaluate that whether such irrelevant ideas help the advertisers to get what they want. This means either the use of such notions which are not directly linked with the product element is good enough to win the consumer mindset and their attitude towards buying that product. It will also be helpful for the advertiser to look at the potential audience mindset presently. This study is unique because no such sort of earlier research is conducted in Pakistan. A number of people talked about advertising industry, the appeals used in advertisements, and their impact on the consumer behavior. This study includes some of the literature which has been done before, starting with the literature review. Organizations that can convey a specific importance, for example prestige, through the presence of an item configuration can make an upper hand in the market and increment the item's short of progress. A number of researchers worked on this idea, which are stated in the slide. The research, according to Krippendorf 1989, the result of configuration ought to be reasonable or significant to somebody. The importance of the presence of an item imparts encourage consumers to survey the items on various prospects including usefulness, stylish, comfort through this process. These thought processes assume in the part of the general item examination. Another research includes, according to Siddiq 2014, the organizations are encountering an exceptional rivalry and not able to tempt their audiences. That's why they made advertisements more attractive. Quoting another research regarding appearance, attributes showed that consumers used to distinguish durable product appearances. The attributes of modernity, simplicity, playfulness were analyzed. However, this research has proved insight into the consumer's perception of durable product appearance, and these attributes can provide valuable guidelines to designers wanting to attune their design product appearance to consumer preferences. Talking about the theoretical perspective of the study is analyzed under the umbrella of Elaboration likelihood model. Advertising is studied by a number of scholars and also is provided with great new dimensions. Two sociologists, Richard Petty and John Cacioppo, in late 19th century worked out a model of information processing they name as Elaboration likelihood model, which focuses on the assumption that for social reasons people are motivated to hold correct attitude. It is unlikely that everyone processes the information in the same way. They might get the facts likely sometimes, but not always. Also, the thinking pattern is important determinant to perceive a particular idea or information. Their way of thinking and getting the idea from any symbol, their attitude is formed on two different routes of cognition. Elaboration likelihood model got success in its implication in advertising. The general idea of this concept is also quoted in one of the slides. Methodology. To address the research question, the researcher conducted a survey on Pakistani public. A questionnaire comprising of close-ended questions were constructed and also as a tool of data collection from consumers. The researcher selected 150 consumers from the age of 20 to 40 years old, those who have exposed to indirect notions-based advertisements, and were willing to participate in the research voluntarily on the basis of random sampling technique. The researcher also conducted interview of two renowned advertising agencies' creative heads who have been working on advertising appeals with indirect notions in them. The in-depth interviews were arranged to know the idea behind the creative genius. Here is the conceptualization and operationalization of the few concepts used in the study. The basic concept of the study is indirect notions. According to Merriam-Webster, notion can be defined as an individual's conception or impression of something known or imagined, a theory or belief held by a person or group. And indirect notion means that anything not directly aimed to achieve idea of a person. If we talk about the operationalized definition of indirect notion, when the word indirect notion is used, it is to explain the aspect of advertising appeals which are not directly indicating towards the actual or main product element in the advertisements. Concept of left field and by association. The idea in a successful advertisement is the product of the infusion of two separate ideas, one related to the brand itself and the other left field. Left field idea that is totally unconnected with the brand. It is the audience's ability to make a connection between two things that signals on effective advertising idea. Left field is an ingredient in successful advertising which is much less obvious. It is something totally unrelated to brand itself. Data analysis. In this portion, data analysis is done on the basis of few themes including Pakistani consumers, human psychological instincts, consumerism, capturing the minds, audience sensitization, competitive approach. Here are the few images that are indicating the results of the research. Firstly, the influential medium. Looking at the slide, it can be easily assumed that in Pakistani audiences, television is a medium which is the most influential. Moving towards the next idea, effects on consumption patterns. Increase in the urge to buy. Capturing the mindsets. Audience sensitization. All these slides show the tilt of Pakistani consumers regarding the advertising appeals which are indirectly related to the product element. Concluding the study, majority of consumers in the survey most likely to make the buying decisions on the basis of advertisements. The advertised brand also play an important role which already is registered in the minds of people. Therefore, there is very little motivation in finding information about the product. The advertisers use two important appeals, humor and emotional. These two are considered idea of to capture audience mindsets. And after getting exposed to a catchy advertisements, reduction in dissonance in the post-purchase stage make the consumers more confident in their purchase decisions. The hypothesis that the use of indirect notion increase the consumption of the product by enhancing the urge to buy a product is proved, and its null hypothesis, that is the use of indirect notion does not increase the urge of buy a project by enhancing the urge to buy, is rejected. The second hypothesis, that is the audience preference pattern formed by the exposure of advertisements increase their sensitization towards the indirect notion, is also proved, and here again the null hypothesis is rejected. To conclude the whole presentation, the idea of impact created by indirect notions on consumers' purchase decision also depends on how involved or apprehended the consumer is to the product, and how much successfully the idea connects to their insight. The consumer loyalty with the product also hinders the way of new products in the market. Pakistani advertising industry is now moving towards the use of indirect notions, and it's not much likely idea in the past. But now the audiences are well sensitized, so as the advertising notions. Here are the references which has been used in the research. Thank you so much for listening.